Welcome to Destination 101, the podcast of Toastmasters District 101. In this alternate short format, instead of a road trip along our namesake of Highway 101 in California, think of this as a short pit stop or a vista point. I'm your host, Birgit Starmanns. Welcome to Destination 101 Pit Stop Edition, meaning a couple of tips and tricks. And this time, I thought I would pick on Zoom yet again. Because how often do we hear, well, it's time for another Zoom call. Yay! Of course, not for this podcast, we're audio only, but that's a daily phrase that we hear, right? Well, it's time for Halloween, and we can expect to see a lot of spooky backgrounds on Zoom, whether those backgrounds are virtual or whether they are our real Halloween decorations. Let's talk about that a little bit. Virtual backgrounds have really become the rage. They're pretty convenient because it helps us to embody a theme that we might have in a meeting or pretend that we are actually on an island, not at home taking a call. Some folks have privacy concerns because they don't want to show you what their homes look like or show you their children running around in the background, or maybe they just have a messy house. Also, on a corporate level, it helps with unified messaging if you have a corporate logo in your background. So whether that's your company, whether that's Toastmasters, whether that's a sporting club, the issue with virtual backgrounds is that they don't always work well when you're using a lot of gestures. That happens regardless of whether or not you have a green screen. If you're using gestures and your lighting is not quite right or you're too close to the camera, your hands look like they are the victim of the Harry Potter invisibility cloak, and they seem to just disappear, and then gestures aren't visible at all. They also don't work well when you have objects or papers that you want to show to the camera as visual aids. And then, of course, if the lighting isn't quite right, or you've got some backlighting, then you always look like you have a halo around your head, so they can be a little bit distracting. My suggestion is to actually try out different backgrounds, and you can get on Zoom and test yourself what you would look like. Try different lighting options. Now, there are some backgrounds that work a little bit better. A solid color usually works pretty well, as long as you don't wear the same color as your background, because then the camera can't distinguish the color of your background green screen and your shirt. I've got two backgrounds that I use from a corporate standpoint that work really well because you can still see all of my gestures because the background is very muted, even though it still shows an office setting. Virtual backgrounds can also have very functional uses. For example, you can display your name and your title if you're at work. You can use it in place of a PowerPoint so that the image is behind you as you speak. I've seen a speaker use a video behind herself as she spoke, and she even pointed to different aspects of the video, almost mimicking the way that the weather is reported on the news. And if you're a Toastmaster, of course, we've all used the background as timing lights. I've also seen a picture of your actual physical background used as a virtual background. A friend was competing in a virtual speech contest in District 101, and he had his books stacked up on his shelf and was concerned that they were going to fall. So he took a picture and used that as his virtual background. And it became part of his speech content and his speech flow. And finally, back to Halloween, in last year's costume contest in District 101, one of the contestants wore an outfit made of green screen. And that way, when he walked around, his head would be appearing different portions of the screen and on top of other people's bodies. Creepy. Of course, you might want to choose a real background. Now, there's a perception that the default needs to be standing in front of a white wall. And while it's good to avoid distractions, it's become very generic to use that as a background. And quite honestly, just because you're not standing in front of a white wall does not mean that you're not prepared. For example, in some of the larger conferences that I've done for my company, we've been told specifically not to use virtual backgrounds because it creates those issues with disappearing gestures or halos, which are seen to be very distracting, especially in a corporate environment. I've worked with different production companies that were filming for these various conferences, and usually I'll take my cell phone and take them on a little tour of my house. This is a potential background. This is a potential background. And two production companies actually liked my picture wall because the pictures were far enough away, and those photos added a little bit of interest versus just a white wall. Another production company really liked the background of just my little office space where I have a shelf in the background. The only suggestion was to take a trophy and move it out of the way by 6 inches so that it wouldn't look like it was growing out of my head. The only other thing about backgrounds, whether virtual or real, try to make sure that the light source is not coming from behind you, because for a virtual background, that's what creates the halos. And for a real background, it means that you are backlit and it'll be very difficult to see your face because there's no light on your face. It's all coming from the back of you. At any rate, for either kind of a background, make a conscious decision. And sometimes, there's no time for that. I've often had to jump on a call with about 2 or 3 minutes notice. And in that case, instead of trying to decide which virtual background am I going to use or am I in the right place exactly, I'll choose to just blur my background, which Zoom does, Microsoft Teams. Most of the software packages out there will do that because that way you can still see my gestures. You can still see that I'm in a real place and I'm still avoiding that halo effect. In the meantime, have fun with it. And if you have a themed meeting, especially in Toastmasters, find a background that will support the theme. Recently, I personally loved a meeting with a Hawaiian theme. Everyone had backgrounds from the islands, from beaches to tiki torches to flowers to... Wait, were those Mai Tais real? Tune in next time and comment or email us at destination101.podcast@gmail.com and review prior episodes at www.d101tm.org/destination-101. Chat with you soon.